So I'd like to welcome everyone officially to our webinar series, part of Ciudad España's commitment to foster intercultural training. My name is Almendra Staffahili. I am the president of Ciudad España, and today we are joined by Peter Mousaferiadis. I'm going to let you correct my pronunciation.
Yes, well, you said it perfectly in Greek. Mousaferiadis is in Greek, and in English, people know me as Mousaferiadis.
Okay, so we're joined by Peter, who is the CEO and founder of Cultural Infusion. And you have quite a few series of awards and things that you have been achieving over the years. But I'd like to point out the most recent one, which is the Associate Chair of the UNESCO Chair for Intercultural and Interreligious Relationships in Asia and the Pacific. I'm going to let you introduce yourself as you would prefer to throughout the session, and I'm going to turn over the session to you to present on this wonderful tool that you've created, the Diversity Atlas. Thank you, Peter.
Yes. Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Almendra. Can everyone see my opening slide with the welcome activity name and all that? Yeah, super, that's great. And I've got a couple of my colleagues who are joining me today. I've got Reza Moyeni, who's our CTO. Hi, Reza, it's great to see you. I see Anna Zeleno, it's good to see you too, Anna. And I've got Osvaldo, who's been stranded in Portugal. He went back to Portugal before the COVID outbreak, and he's been stuck there ever since. So he's our designer. Great to see you this morning as well. Yeah, for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Peter Mousaferiadis, and I hope by the end of this session you'll get to know a little bit more about me, and in particular about my name. Where I come from in Australia, it's often customary to do a traditional welcome. Here we've got the words Waminjeka, which is in the language of the Woiwurrung people, and it means welcome. In the city of Melbourne, there were four main tribes. There was the Bunurong, there was Jajawarong, Tangarong, Wadawurrung, and the Woiwurrung people who made up the Kulin Nation of the city of Melbourne. And the city of Melbourne was always an important meeting place for about 50,000 years. And it was a meeting place for, events of education, social, sporting, spiritual, and even cultural significance. And today we're all coming together, just like the past and the present. And let's also acknowledge, the future custodians and their respective connection to land, waters, and communities. And if there's any elders in the community, I also pay my respects to you. It's a little unknown fact about Australia that before the Europeans colonized this part of the world in the late 1700s, there was an estimated 700 languages that were spoken here, and approximately 324 distinct ethnic groups, or as we would describe probably as nations today. Many of you are probably not aware. I had an extensive career as a conductor, composer, creative director. I produced lots of major intercultural productions. I produced 9 Australia Day concerts here. I produced opening and closing ceremonies for the Parliament of World Religions, for the United Nations, lots of shows throughout Southeast and East Asia. My final Australia Day concert in 2012 was probably one of the largest events I did. We had a cast of about 1,200 that worked on that. And I was backstage with the most senior First Nations Aboriginal custodian of the city of Melbourne. Her name was Joy Murphy. And I was backstage, everything was going smoothly. And I said, Joy, you're about to go out on stage and do a traditional welcome. I want to know how many people speak, your mother language, Woiwurrung, the language of your people. And how many thousands of people speak it? And she goes, thousands of people. And sadly, she replied, there's only one living person who speaks the language of my people, and that's my auntie. And I put a thought to all of you. How would you feel if you're the last speaker of your mother tongue? At this point, I think I might want to offer a moment's silence. The pandemic has completely wreaked havoc across the globe, and it's having disproportionate impact on individuals, communities. It's perpetuated difference, poverty, inequality, discrimination, and exclusion. I often hear governments say that we're in this together. We're not in this together. And government's non-nuanced approach in many ways is perpetuating difference. So at this point, I want to offer a moment's silence. I've got my Tibetan bowl here, which helps me to reflect. And I'm just going to strike it. And during this period, I'd like us just to offer this moment's silence to all those who are less fortunate than us. Thank you very much. So today we're going to open, I'm going to open today with an opportunity to connect with each of you through the stories of our names. Our names hold stories which are the doors to cultures and to identities. As human beings, we all have a culture and we all have many, many identities. I don't want to preach to the converted, but, culture shapes the way we understand the world, the way we behave. We all engage with culture every single moment. Culture is overarching, it's underpinning. But it is usually the parts of culture that we can see. It's the parts of culture such as listening and smelling and listening to music and dance and food. But culture is so much more than that. It's those deeper aspects of culture that are below the surface that we need to engage with a lot more. It's those deeper aspects that really dictate the things that we see. In an increasingly globalized world, and the world's become more globalized than ever, especially since the advent of the World Wide Web in 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee. It's created this super compressed world where time and space are all happening in a moment. In a flicker of time. It's important that more than at this moment that we engage with values to create, deeper connections and more bridges of understanding. And I feel that's what we need during this time. And as interculturalists, this is the role that we need to play today. We've had massive economic globalization in the last 3 decades without globalization of values and ethics. So how do we go deeper? Well, in this first activity, I'm going to share with you, it's really it's a simple activity, but a powerful way of breaking the ice and starting a conversation about each other's culture. It's something that we always learn about other people, but we really don't talk about it. A person's name, is an example of identity. Identity is, who you are, but it's also how you think of yourself. It's the way you're perceived by others and the characteristics that define you. Now I want to really introduce myself, because all I've said to you is my name's Peter Mousaferiadis, but there's a big story behind that name, and I want to share that story with that slide that you see in front of you, which is a slide of my grandparents. My name is Peter Mousaferiadis, but Peter's my middle name. Panayotis is actually my name that I was assigned at birth, and it's also the name on my passport. Very few people know me by that name. In the 1970s, when I was growing up as a kid, if you had a non-Anglo name, you changed your name for ease of pronunciation. But really, the name change was because of ethnic and race-based discrimination, which was ubiquitous and still is prevalent today. A name which was not easy to pronounce was often weaponized against individuals and groups. Don't even get me started on how my name was weaponized against me, especially my surname. My surname, Mousaferiadis, has a story which would take me weeks and weeks to explain to you. I am forever learning about my surname. And in a few, words, this name was the name that was assigned to my father's father, my grandfather. In other words, he never spoke a word of Greek. Even when I met my grandfather in 1976 as a boy, after 53 years of living in Greece, he still didn't know a word of Greek, just Turkish. Similar to my mother, who's been living in Australia for 65 years and knows maybe 4 or 5 words of English. That's it. She never went to school in Greece, so she can't even read and write in her own language. My grandfather was born in the 1800s. He was born in the Ottoman Empire. In 1905, when he was still a child, his uncle Nascawi came to him and he said, there's a pogrom going on against Armenians and you're half Armenian. From this point onwards, you're no longer going to be called Aaron Artin. Your name is going to be Anastasios Athanasiou. And Anastasios Athanasiou was literally a direct translation of his Armenian name, which means the resurrected immortal one. My grandfather being of Greek Armenian ancestry, lost his entire family except for his brother. They both grew up in an orphanage. This was quite a tumultuous time in history. The Ottoman Empire was crumbling. European powers were scrambling to make a stake on its lands. The Ottoman Empire was left with no choice but to follow in the same footsteps of Europe and to nationalize, but not without one of the largest fires in history, a fire which wiped off the face of the earth, the jewel of the Mediterranean, where more Greeks in 1922 lived in this city, Smyrna. This became known as the Asia Minor catastrophe and resulted in this massive exchange of populations, which brought to an end 4,000 years of Greek civilizations on the western coast of modern-day Turkey. My grandfather and his partner, Despina, survived death marches. They were exiled. They survived the death marches, but the child did not. The first child didn't survive. They went on to have another 7 children. In 1923, when my grandfather arrived in Greece, his name was Anastasios Athanasiou, but he loved to visit people and he used to love traveling around the place. So people said, here comes the Mousafir or the Mousafir in Greek, which literally means the traveler. And that's how my name came about, Mousaferiadis. There's only one family that has this name and has that spelling of the name. My father's brother spells it in a different way. So Mousafir in more than 800 languages, extending all the way from the Great Wall of China, Western China, from the Kyrgyzstan, so that's Central Asia, all the way up to the Balkans, to throughout the Middle East, throughout North Africa and even East Africa. It means the traveler. So whenever I find myself traveling to many parts of the world, and in particular South Asia, where I've spent quite a bit of time, and in places like Pakistan, they go, yeah, here he comes, Peter the traveler. But I want to just look at the etymology of the name. And that reveals another very interesting aspect. Musa was the name given to Moses. And Musa in Hebrew literally means boxwood. It was this wooden box that was floating down this Nile River with a baby in it, which became immortalized in literature, religion, history, language, and societies across the globe. Incidentally, my grandfather's original name, Aaron, was also the Moses' brother's name. So you see, through a little simple introduction that I've just given you, you've learned something about me through my name and how my name is connected to histories, to lands, to cultures, to languages, to religions. So this is the idea of the first activity that we're going to do today. And we're going to break out into just groups of maybe 2 people, 2 or 3. And in this activity, you're going to share your name, your last name, and discuss one of the following. What is the meaning and history of your name? Some of you might not know much about it. Some of you might want to go off and do a bit of a Google and look at the etymology of the name. I want you to discuss with your, in your group, in your pairs, what are maybe some of the cultural, religious, dimensions, linguistic dimensions to your name? Who gave you the name? Were you named after someone? And anything else that you want to, share about that name. And I really want you to listen deeply, during this, activity. So we're going to give maybe 10 minutes for this activity, and, share some of the wisdoms, share some of the learnings, and share some of the deeper insights as well. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah.
That went really quickly.
It does, doesn't it? It always goes super, super quick. It's great to see you, Pamela. Okay, so maybe just some reflections, everyone. So maybe I can just have a quick, from each of the groups, just a 30-second reflection, if that's okay. Would someone like to volunteer? Or can I just choose someone? Maybe I can choose my colleague, Reza Moyeni, our CTO of our organization, is waking up at 2 o'clock to be part of this. Thank you, Reza. What's your reflection?
Thanks, Peter. Melanie and I were in the room, so we talked about many different things, cultural backgrounds and our area of working. It was cool. So I just mentioned that in my culture, which I'm like Persian background, every name has a name. And my first name Reza means someone who's happy, and my last name Moini means someone who helps others. So my mates in the office usually call me Happy Helper. I try to keep that attribute, but not sure about that, but I try to keep the trend. And I hand over to Melanie.
Yeah, it was so nice talking to Reza. It was really interesting and fun. My background, it's Spanish, but my first name comes from the Greek language. But I only have it because my mom finds it fancy. It doesn't have any family background or in Greece or anything. It's just a fancy name that she finds it fancy, so she named me this way. And it means stone of a dark color. But my last name, Quintanilla, it's a Spanish background, but I actually don't know the roots of it, or the meaning of it. It's something to dig for.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So can I have maybe another couple, and maybe you can just share what you learned about the other person and how it maybe relates to, the different dimensions of, cultural diversity, how it relates to, ancestral heritage, culture, language, maybe religion, and even a country. Thank you. Who would like to nominate? Which group would like to put their hands up? And please use the chat to share some of your reflections from that activity. Can I maybe, Anna Zalno, let's start with you. Thank you. And your group. What did you learn about the other person? Not about yourself. I don't want to know about your name. I want to know about the name that you. What did you learn about that other name?
We both realized. So I was together with Hines, and we both realized that we really don't know a lot about our names, and that we never have researched about it. And we started to talk about diversity atlas in general, because yesterday we started the survey, so we just changed the topic a little bit. And but what we had in common is that we realized we never really thought about the origin of our names and the cultural heritage in the name. So we are quite ignorant. Hines, are we?
Yes. And who was your partner? Sorry, was it Pamela?
Hines. No, Hines. You can see it as, I don't know.
Oh yeah, Hines. Yes. Would you like to share something, Hines? Some reflections. You're on mute.
I think he had problems also with internet.
Okay. Is anyone else who would like to maybe share something about that activity? Pamela, thank you.
Yeah, I could say something. So I was with Esperanza, and what I learned about her name is, first of all, both her first and her family name translate into something. So Esperanza meaning hope, and Portillo meaning doorknob. And so my afterthought was, my name doesn't mean anything, Pamela or Strawgate. So, which is interesting in an Anglophone culture, but Russian, perhaps some Russian origin. And another thing we discovered, she didn't like her name as a youngster because it was considered very old fashioned, but as a young adult, and once she left her country, it was a little bit more, she learned to like it. It was a little more exotic and she appreciated it more. And is there anything you want to add, Esperanza? Did I cover it?
You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. What I also liked is that we both have like different names in our country. We are called in a certain way in our home country, and where we live, they have another pronunciation or another name. So it sort of shows also the type of our identity, either at home or how to say, abroad. So I like this idea also that we play with our identity with our name as well.
Right. Okay, and Carolyn, yeah, Pamela, you said
I'll piggyback on that because my name is Carolyn, which the intonation doesn't fit most other cultures. So when I'm outside of working in other languages and other cultures, it's Caroline, Carolina, and actually both two great grandmothers were Caroline from North Norway. So I get the best of both worlds. Amy and I had kind of a story that there was a conflict of her, a country conflict, Swedish and Danish, back in the days when there was conflict there. And so her father, mother, somebody was pushed towards staying with a Dane and not having a Swedish boyfriend. And then in my case, it's through adoptions, but within the family. And we actually think my great-grandfather's oldest sister was actually his mother, not his sister. And I'm expecting now somebody with DNA will contact me and say, we have similar DNA and we think you're a member of our family. That happened to us recently with my mother's father. We now know who his father was. We always knew it wasn't who his mother was married to. So I think the overarching premise is people are really involved with a lot of this.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. So if you look in the chat, I just looked up the etymology of your name, Carolyn, and Pamela looked up the etymology of your name. So if you don't know what your name means, just type it in and type your name in and etymology, and will just take you to so many places. And you'll start to just go down this sort of, down this sort of Google, minefield, and it'll start to connect you with so many different cultures in so many different places, and you'll start to look at how your name was actually constructed, and what cultures influenced it, or what happened during history for that name to sort of change and evolve. So thank you very much to those participants who shared their reflections. And if you'd like to share some more reflections of that experience, please put them in the into the chat. I'm just going to share again. Let me share my, okay. Yep. Okay, so no two humans have exactly the same identities. It is this difference which has been poorly understood, and in many ways, what has driven the development of Diversity Atlas. But before I begin a deep dive of the Diversity Atlas and the amount of work that we did to create this tool, over 6 years of, research and development, and literally millions and millions of dollars to get it to where it is today. I want to talk about what do we mean by diversity before I get to cultural diversity. Diversity simply means difference. No one thing can be diverse. And diversity is an aggregate of a group. I often hear people say, oh, I'm pretty diverse. I have a lot of diversity. And I think, well, in order to be diverse, you need to compare yourself to something else. Okay. So what we did was we wanted to understand the metrics behind diversity. And here, there's a slide here. I'm going to speak to that slide. And hopefully Osvaldo's going to create sort of a human pictogram of this so you can understand it in another way. But let's say on the far left there, the variety over here, we had, say, 2 Italian. These circles represented 2 Italian, and the triangles represented 2 Spanish languages. And then on the bottom here, we've got, say, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. We have a greater variety there. That is already one metric of diversity. So we can apply an algorithm to that. And Reza Moyeni, our mathematician and chief technology officer, and went to a school for geniuses, is the brainchild behind all the metrics that sit underneath this tool. Balance is looking at the distribution of what we're trying to measure across an organization. So how often do you see in organizations, you might go to the finance area and you might see all the people that work in the finance are from South Asia. The further north that you go, the more monocultural the organization might become. Or you might find that in the marketing department, most of the people might be, there might be a gender imbalance, and 80 or 90% might be women. This is what we mean by balance, the distribution of what we're trying to measure across an organization. In Australia, 4 years ago, the Australian Human Rights Commission produced a report which showed that 97% of all the people that held the key leadership positions of the top 200 companies came from a Northern European background. It wasn't at all reflective of 50% of the population that come from a non-Northern European background in Australia. The last metric of diversity is disparity, or the dissimilarity of what we're trying to measure. Now, let's say here, these on the top right here, we had Italian, French, and Spanish. And down the bottom here, we had Italian, Japanese, and Arabic. Then the diversity in that bottom right box is going to be much greater. And we know that someone's ethno-linguistic background shapes empathy, shapes cognitive processes, shapes people's smiles. So these are the three metrics that we came up for diversity. So now that you've understood what diversity means, you can begin to recognize that every aspect of a society and every organization has a diversity touch point. But how do we understand cultural diversity? And cultural diversity until recently was poorly defined, analytically neglected, and it was also in need of robust understanding. But cultural diversity to me always meant humanity's most underutilized brand. We didn't do enough to draw upon cultural diversity as a way of being able to progress societies, to innovate, to reduce poverty, to build quality education programs, and last but not least of all, to build sustainable, socially cohesive, and even peaceful communities. And I'm not saying this. UNESCO's now coming out saying that culture can be a great driver for these aspects. So what we did was we started to unpack cultural diversity. We conducted more than 300 literature reviews, and we disaggregated cultural diversity into 4 pillars. And I'm going to talk about those 4 pillars in a moment. What we also noticed was that if we were going to take this metric approach, we needed to have inclusive data sets and to make sure that no one was being left out when we were taking this measurement approach with diversity. Because at the moment, a lot of people and a lot of communities are feeling invisible. I just want to talk to this slide. You know, most companies and most organizations out there understand their community, understand their customers. And in many cases, they understand their customers better than what the customers understand themselves. But most organizations don't understand who they are. Most governments don't even understand who their communities are. And that's because they can't collect data around certain aspects of identity. And I'm going to speak to that in a moment. But investors, you know, customers, everyone is now expecting more diversity engagement. There's been an explosion of DEI managers across the globe, and people becoming DEI managers, as we're seeing in many organizations, without even any DEI experience, without any intercultural experience. They're just being thrusted into these roles to say, well, now, you know, you've had a HR role, we want you to become a DEI manager. So what we've decided to do is go, okay, if there's going to be an explosion of all these DEI roles, how can we start to take a data-driven approach and make sure no one is being left out, and to start to inform strategies and action plans which are going to make settings more inclusive and representative. But let's talk about inclusive data sets. The European Commission at the beginning of the year came out with their anti-racism action strategy. And throughout the document, they go on about the need for more accurate and comparable data. In 1978, in France, there were a whole lot of laws that were introduced, which prohibited the collection of data, especially around asking questions, which had to do with one's ethnicity or religious background. And that's created a whole series of unintended consequences. A few weeks ago, we had the national census in Australia, and there was an uproar by so many people in Australia. A lot of people thought, well, this census is not doing anything for me. I come from Myanmar. In Myanmar, there's 110 languages that are spoken there, 135 ethnic groups, and I'm not included in your database. And we had a Kachin person who said, well, I'm feeling like I don't exist. I'm feeling like me and my people are disappeared. And this is quoting this person literally. So it's very important that aspects of identity are really included and to make sure that no one's feeling like this. And a similar thing in Canada with their national census. And this is what people are feeling now. There's an explosion of diversity, but people want to be recognized and accepted for who they are. So how do we go about inclusive, creating this inclusive standardized approach, where everyone is included? Well, that's what led to the formation of Diversity Atlas. In many ways, I started this whole journey back in 1988, and I started building data sets back then. And I'll talk a bit about those data sets. 6 years of R&D, more than 300 literature reviews, which led us to create a Diversity Atlas, as well as these data sets. And then, Diversity Atlas, which is basically the simple survey, which you're all going to participate in a few moments' time. And then we're going to look at who we are as a community. I now want to talk about the 7 pillars that make up Diversity Atlas. The first 4 pillars are how we disaggregated cultural diversity. First pillar is languages and speech communities and dialects. So speech communities might be Spanish in Spain, Spanish in Argentina, Spanish in Ecuador, all slightly different. And there's a database that sits in Diversity Atlas of 11,200 languages and speech communities. But what we do is, how do we categorize those data sets? So we aggregate it according to family groups and regions and so forth, which allows us to look at the relationship of one language to the next, which is that distance, that dissimilarity. The second pillar is our cultural heritage. And we've done a lot of thinking about this. We argue about this at work all the time with our anthropologists, and we're going backwards and forwards. So what we've been able to do is sort of really unpack what we mean by cultural heritage, ancestral heritage, cultural heritage. There's a slight difference, geoculture, national culture, and even subgroups as well as ethnicity. They're all slightly different. And we're trying to capture those in our database by the way, in the way that we categorize them. Countries, we use the United Nations database of countries. Now we've expanded that definition a little bit to include 4 more countries, and I won't go into detail why we did that, but also the dependent territories. So if you were born, for example, in Puerto Rico, you're probably not going to say you're American, you'll say you're Puerto Rican. Or if you're born in the Cook Islands are dependent territories of New Zealand, you're not going to say you're a New Zealander, but you're a Cook Islander. And then you'll probably say what part of the Cook Islands you come from. And we go back 3 generations. So where you were born, where your parents were born, and where your grandparents were born. And usually what happens after the 3rd generation, people start to gravitate towards the national culture. Not always, but generally speaking, according to the research that we've done. Have I missed anything? Okay, then we've got worldviews or religion. We use the word worldview as a way of being able to make sense of all living things around us. So we're trying to make it the term as inclusive as possible, and the data sets that we have, all the categories, is to try to include those who might be define themselves as atheists or humanists or Buddhists, and all the branches. So there's more than 7,900. Religions and worldviews. So you might define yourself as a Muslim, and you might say I'm a Muslim, and I'm a Sunni, and I'm a Shafi'i. But I also identify as being a Buddhist, and I also identify as being actually an atheist. And how does that work? Well, you might subscribe to the practices of those religions because both your parents are maybe a Buddhist and a Muslim, but you see yourself as being an atheist. And I understand that. Being someone from Greek Orthodox, I define myself as a pluralist, as a humanist, as a Greek Orthodox, and also as a Buddhist, as a Greco-Buddhist. And I won't talk about that, but that's because a Greek Orthodox gives so much meaning and shapes so much of my daily life in terms of the foods that we cook, the fasting that we do. We want to be connected to the whole culture and all the traditions, and it gives us a sense of belonging. Now, the 5th pillar is the demographics and personal attributes. So we took this LGBTQIA category and we've disaggregated it into gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and also biological sex. So you start to, develop a sort of kaleidoscopic. If you think of all these, tens of thousands of categories, and then you start to intersect it against different, aspects of gender and age and position type and position level, there are billions of different, identities out there. Number 6, mutuality and representation. For me, this is the most important aspect of working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and also in the intercultural space. You can do all the work you want in the world to be as diverse and equitable and inclusive, in your organization. But if it's not reflecting the community that you're operating in, then you're going to create tension and you'll probably become redundant. And a lot of major corporations are seeing this. So that's why you need to be constantly adapting to your environment. And the genesis for this idea was one of the principles of one of the laws of recursive known as the principle of thermodynamics, which states that any system, if it's not as equally as varied as the environment it's operating in, it will eventually probably disappear. So what we do is we look at the mutuality, which is to what extent is your organization reflective of the community that it's delivering services to. We look at the mutuality internally and externally. So we'll be comparing one department to the next, and what does your organization look like? Or you want to, create a new workforce in a different part of the world. What do you need for that workforce so it can reflect the environment that it's going to go and operate in. Okay, and the last pillar is an experience and inclusion aspect, where we can just tag on a survey to Diversity Atlas and add a whole lot of other questions. Okay, so that just gives you just sort of a pictogram of Diversity Atlas. If you ask me what is Diversity Atlas, I would say to you, well, it's a transformational analytics tool which is able to provide comprehensive insights, not only into the extent and type of cultural, but a whole range of other demographic dimensions of diversity. Now, we can't cover every dimension of diversity, but we feel we've covered enough there for an organization so we can start to work towards representation, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so we've done a bit of work with the health sector, and we're about now to work with 52 hospitals and healthcare providers here in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And they recognise that hospitals that have got workforces that reflect the communities that they're operating in tend to have better health outcomes, and they're more efficient. They spend less money on translation costs. So the health sector is now really beginning to embrace Diversity Atlas. Okay, I'm going to go live and show you the tool. Actually, I'm not going to go live. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys to do the second workshop, and I'm going to get you guys to click on the token and do the survey, and then we're going to break out into rooms for about 10 minutes, and you're going to click on that document there. I think it should be in the chat. And then you're going to discuss amongst yourselves how you feel a data-driven approach can bring value to an organization, to a society. And I want you to also talk about maybe what do you think the risks might be. I think we've got enough people here today, so we can just go straight into the tool and we can look at it. Okay, so back to all of you.
So do we just want everybody to, I've put into the chat box the link to the survey, which is under step number 1. So if everybody could just click there and then complete the survey. Perhaps we should wait until everybody's completed it before I send them into rooms, no? Or do you want them to go into rooms?
Whatever's easier. So maybe they can just sort of go into rooms as they finish. Is that possible, or do we bring them all back?
Or if everybody could just, for a moment, just do the survey, and then when we know that everybody's done, I can open the rooms, and they can go and speak to what is on the questions, and then
so maybe rooms of maybe 3 to 4 people in each room.
Okay. Right now there would be one room with 5 people and one room with 4.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure,
or do you want them
fine.
smaller?
No, that's fine. I think that's good.
Okay. So if everybody could just complete it, and when you're done, if you could, let's see, how do we want to do this? If you could use your reaction button and raise your hand, then we know that you're done. And when everybody's done, I can move people into the rooms. I'm just going to pause the recording. Record again if you would like to continue. We'll all stay together here in this room, and we won't go into breakouts.
Okay then. So I'm just going to see if I can move this over here. Okay. So can you see this is the Diversity Atlas dashboard? Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay then. So this is so as soon as the data has been loaded up, there's all these heat maps. So there's a world map, and you can just sort of highlight over it straight away. There's some just sort of key facts up the top. There were 10 departments. This is dummy data that we're looking at. 247 participants, 41 countries, 71 languages spoken in total, 21 worldviews, and 106 cultural heritages. Then over here we've got a graph which looks at the gender breakdown, and straight away you can go, okay, I want to just compare the male and the female, and what do I see here? And straight away you can just get a quick sense, and you can see that the women start to, taper off, leave the organization a lot earlier. There seems to be a bit of a dip over here, between the ages of, 30 and 35. And that's probably because, women might be leaving the workforce and they re-enter because they've had kids and they come back again. And they generally sort of leave a lot earlier from a workforce. Then once you've got this data, what sort of strategies can an organization start to use to try to improve retention? We've just built a calendar into our Diversity Atlas, and there's in total there's going to be about 4,000 days in there, and the days will be anything from international days, religious days, social justice days, and the list just goes on. So you can just sort of click and go, okay, I want to look at what's happening in November, and you can just scroll down and you get a quick sense of all the different dates and festivities. And eventually this will link into the demographics of the organization. So if you've got a large percentage that are Hindu, it'll send you reminders saying, well, these religious days that are coming up at the moment, you might want to do something for your workforce. Then there's just some more general information and the overview panel, how many people spoke English, how many people identify with being Christian, and how many people identify with being, American. So it sort of takes some general key facts. I'm going to jump to the Diversity Atlas and the 4 key pillars. I might just look at languages, waiting for the data to load. There's some statistical insights at the bottom of every single page, and this is produced automatically, so you can just have a look at it, and it goes 38 languages spoken at an advanced level. Staff born in Sri Lanka on average speak the highest number of languages. So it starts to, do a quick dive into the data. But up the top, we can start to quickly have get a sense of, different bar charts, pie charts, and we can get a sense of, what language, the top 5 languages that are spoken. But the bit that I love about this is you can start to look at the languages in terms of zones and then macro zones. But what else you can do is start to look at these graphs, and then you can start to get a sense of how languages are related to each other. So we might want to click on, the Celtic languages, and all of a sudden you've got in the organization people speaking Irish, Scottish, and Gaelic and Welsh. Or you go, okay, I want to do a bit of a dive on the Semitic languages that are spoken in the organization. And here you have the 4 Semitic or 5 Semitic languages that are spoken in the organization. So this is what we mean by that third metric that we were talking about in Diversity Atlas. And we can do a similar thing with worldviews and religions. We can go straight to the religions, and we can click on them again and again. So this is a way of being able to start to aggregate the different subgroups into bigger groups and get a sense of how we all come from the one source. But over here we can look at Protestant and independent Christianity, and quickly gives us a sense of all the subgroups of Protestant and Christianity within the organization. Or we might go to Mahayana Buddhism, and all of a sudden, most of you are probably not aware, but Falun Gong is a branch of Mahayana Buddhism, and most people who practice Falun Gong probably don't even know that. And similarly, we can do the same with our cultural heritages. I'm going to move to the compare panel, and this is our favorite panel, and this is looking at that mutuality. And there are 2 aspects. We can look at internally what an organization looks like, comparing one department to the next. So let's say we might want to compare the marketing department to the accounting department, and all of a sudden we can get a sense of the differences in terms of the demographics that we're looking at. And now we can also do an external comparison. So you might want to go, okay, I want to look at the organization, and I want to see how it compares to Singapore, or the census data in Singapore. So we've loaded in data from how many countries, Reza, in total? Now it's about 100, I think, and we're constantly loading in data all the time. So that's the survey. I want to move now to the activity, which was to get all of you to, we've got a few minutes, so maybe to get all of you for 10 minutes, just breaking up into 2 groups, and to discuss those two questions. What value do you think a data-driven approach could bring to organizations and to societies? And what do you think could be the risk? Maybe spend 5 minutes on each of those two questions. Thank you.
So I'll break them into two different groups. There's going to be one group with 3 people and the other one with 4.
That's
and you
right.
and I will hang out. And Pamela, that's fine. Thank you. Here we go. The second question, I believe, is in the chat box. So Reza, you're asking, what was the second question? The questions are: discuss with your Zoom colleagues what value do you think a data-driven approach could bring? And then what do you think the risk could also be? That's the second question. Yeah, so I'm going to open those sessions. You have 5 minutes and happy discussions, and then we'll hear it back.
Yeah, 5 minutes on each question. Thank you.
Oh, 5 minutes on each question. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Then let me but 5 minutes total. You'd be back in, like, it's just not going to give you any time at all to speak. Okay, all set. 10 minutes and off you go.
I'm going to log in now. I'm going to log in and just see how many people, whether we've got enough people. Let me log out of this one. Maybe I can share my screen. We can look at it together.
Okay.
Since you're Sieta, there we are. Yes, we have enough data. Thank God.
Okay, good.
Exactly 10 participants.
Oh, well, that was lucky.
Okay. So 10 participants, and out of the 10 participants, we come from 7 countries, 12 languages that are spoken, 9 world views, 12 heritages. So we can go over here and we can go to country of birth. So we can look at all the countries. We can look at the parents, and we can look at grandparents as well. We can look at languages as a community, and here we've got, okay. Oh, this is great, isn't it? Look at this.
Yeah.
I love this. This is a new feature we built.
It's fantastic.
Oh, the amount of work that's gone into creating this, it's just been endless. World views. Give me a look at the world views. Isn't this interesting? Look at this.
I think only when it's a round dot. No, when it's circled in, can it open up again? Is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
when
cultural.
It's an open circle. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
Geocultural. Oh, you see, some people have just selected, they've just selected anything, I can tell, because I don't think we've got anyone from Angola in the group. Maybe. Okay, so one of the things we're doing is we're collapsing all the speech communities into English, British, Scottish. Oh. You see, sometimes there might be some errors here too. What's also white? White
United
American.
States, white.
Okay, so USA, of course. Yeah, well, okay, then there's nothing to compare really. We can do an external comparison, and we can go, okay, what does the group look like compared to, let's say, all of Spain? Spain here.
Maybe you have to type it in. No, I guess it doesn't appear. There's no data.
Oh, there we go. It does, yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay.
There we go. So we can compare ourselves to Spain. And one of the things we can do is look at these graphs here, these mutuality graphs. And the more they overlap, the more mutuality there is. Okay. And then the other thing we can look at is the, let me look at the demographics. Yeah, we can look at some of the stats here. And the stats for every single one of them. So seven languages spoken at an advanced level, 6 languages spoken at a basic level, 100% of the group are multilingual. Isn't that great? You know, compared to Australia, where, you know, 80% are like only know one language, 90% know one language. So this just gives you a bit of a sense of the insights.
It really does.
And
with great information. It really does.
Yeah, I was wishing Anna should have hung around. I should have probably gone straight into this from the very beginning.
That's all right. This will be this is being recorded, so people can actually continue to learn.
Oh, okay.
As you're, I thought to stop it, but I'm keeping it because I think it's very
okay. I didn't know you were recording.
This.
Okay, this is good. This is great. So I'm just doing a quick sort of a whistle stop tour, and you can export the data. You can cut it up in endless amounts of ways once you've got all this data. So you can look at all the languages. Here we go, the 12 languages in total. I think that includes also some speech communities. No, modern Greek, ancient Greek are 2 different languages. I speak. I'm versed. That's me actually, because I know ancient Greek. Basque. Oh, this is good. Basque is a language isolate. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that.
No one knows where Basque came from.
No, and I mean, I do know that there were almost like, you know, traveler guides for the St. James route across the north of Spain to go to Santiago during the pilgrimage years. And there were travel guides, I can't remember, the 1300s, 1400s. And they described, you know, you're going to walk, you will be walking through a land where the sound of the language is as if dogs were barking. That's the description, you know, 600-700 years ago regarding it. But it's completely alone. It doesn't have.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's look at this here. Countries of birth, 30% were born in the United States. There are 10 participants. There's a diversity index of 79. I mean, the larger the organization, the diversity index becomes smaller because there's not an infinite amount of languages, of course. But the purpose of the diversity index is to give an organization a rating, and it's not there to compare itself to other organizations. It's about them being able to reflect and go, okay, if we want to set some diversity targets in the future, what do we need to do in the organization? And so are we more diverse, you know, or are we less diverse 12 months from now? Especially if you're around the same size. If the organization grows, then the number, you know, is impacted because it's really dependent on the size. And once we have enough organizations subscribing to our diversity atlas, and we've got thousands, then we'll be able to get a sense that if you're an organization of 500 people, this is a good rating. If you're an organization of 5,000, this is what the rating should look like.
And this diversity index takes into account all of those diversity dimensions, which is really...
That's right, it does. Yeah. So if you go to the overview, there's that's the diversity index, and then there's a diversity index given for each of the different pillars. So over here, 70, that's 80. The other one was 79. If we go to languages, it's 60 diversity rating. Worldviews is 80. It's really high, but that's because there's not many of us.
It's a small, and we're a very diverse group. I think when we do trainings with CIATAR, it tends to skew things because because there's people joining in from all over the world taking part in this particular context of these webinars, because they are open to the public and they're quite interesting. So we get people from all over the place. It would be interesting to use this tool specifically just for CIATAR Spain, for the 74 members, to see whether, organizations that claim, to work within diversity, whether they in fact represent the diversity that they are, that they're teaching about, training about, working for, defending.
Yeah, absolutely. So when they come back, I might just leave the screen on and just do a quick overview, spend 5 minutes, and then listening to what everyone's got to say.
Okay, there's about 20 more seconds before they come back.
Okay.
Okay. I think this overview that you've provided is very helpful, specifically for the recording, for those people that weren't able to attend. Okay, we're closing those groups and they're going to be coming back. We have 30 seconds to return.
Okay, is everyone back?
We're still missing one of the rooms. They haven't joined us yet. They're probably trying to get their last words in.
Yeah.
Not enough time again, Esperanza, or?
No.
There's never enough time. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. And I hope you enjoyed that activity. So what I've done here is I've just logged into the dashboard of Diversity Atlas, and we did have 10 people, because if we don't have at least 10 people, then the Diversity Atlas won't disclose any data. So this is what the map looks like. And there's some heat maps here, and we can just sort of hover over them. And we know that 3 people, said that they were born in the United States. I know that's me from Australia. Anyone else from Australia? Reza? We've got Persia here. We've got Spain. Then we've got, what the gender breakdown looks like. So if I just want to look at, if I want to look at the male versus female, we can quickly get a sense that we've got no men in the organisation between the ages of 45 and 50, but we've got more females between the ages of 36 and 50. Let me just scroll down. 10 people registered in total. We've got 10% said they were born in Spain. 1 person identified with a disability. 10 people. All of us have a tertiary education. The overall diversity index was 79%. I'm just going to move on to some of the other graphs. The countries of birth over here. These are the statistical insights. 30% said they were born in the United States. 30% of the participants were born in Europe. 20% in Oceania. No one was born in Africa. So there's all these statistical insights that really that Diversity Atlas is able to just instantly produce. Let's look at the languages. What's our linguistic competency like? And over here, these are the sort of the top. These are the top 5 languages that are spoken, and we can look at them through zone or macro zone, or we can do a bit of a deep dive here, and we can go, okay, when there's a coloured circle, we got someone that spoke Hebrew, someone that spoke Persian, Romanic, French, Italian. Oh, yeah, Romance languages. Of course, in Spain, most people would speak at least one or all those languages. Slavic, and we have someone speaking Bulgarian as well. Germanic languages, German and English. Let's go to worldviews. with the worldviews, let's look at this graph because I love this. This is my favorite. And these are the worldviews that were selected. But we can also look at them as a list. And we can also look at the statistical insights. So 9 worldviews were nominated in total. 30% of the group chose not to disclose their religion or worldview. 20% of staff identify with more than one worldview. That's interesting. I identify with 4. You can only select 3. Can we change it to 4, please? Then we're going to look at, let's look at cultural heritage of the organisation. There's a diversity rating of 89. That's what it's given. This is not a number to compare yourself to another organisation. It's about being able to look at who you are now and then maybe say, we want to develop some diversity targets. What is that number a year from now? And over here, we've got the cultural heritages, Persian, Portuguese, Jewish, Australian, Greek. And we can look at it from, in terms of cultural families, cultural zones. We can also look at it through this graph, which is my favorite. And what's mulatto? I don't know what mulatto is. Latin American mulatto. Okay. Is that, I've never heard of that one.
That would be people that are white and of African descent.
Okay.
European, usually, and African descent as well.
Okay, so eventually what we will have on Diversity Atlas is you'll be able to hover over this and then there'll be a little tiny description that comes up. Yeah, so this is who we are as a community. I'm going to pass it over. We've got 8 minutes left. I want to pass it over for questions and also reflections on those 2 questions that I gave you all. Thank you very much. We can unmute ourselves. You can use your emoticon, and you can raise your hand like I've just done it now, and you can lower it as well. Okay, then. So the 2 questions that we had, what value do you think a data-driven approach can bring to your, to societies and to organizations? Did someone want to open up the conversation? Amy?
Sure. Well, I just felt, I was telling Osvaldo that because we were together in a room and he's one of the designers, that I'm just so astounded by the tool because of, as you've put it, Peter, the deep dive that you can do on all the information. I think that it's so fascinating, and I can see that within an organization that it would, once members of the organization are seeing the diversity that exists within, if it's used appropriately afterward, I mean, if the organization perhaps has coaching, which I was to understand that your team maybe also walks an organization through how to use the data afterwards, where the tool could really be useful of making people feel that they're included. So bringing inclusivity, bringing, people feeling like, oh, I'm not the only one that speaks Hebrew, or I'm not the only one who's a Hindu, for example. And those are all just amazing insights for an organization to take in and then be able to work with thereafter.
Yeah. So Amy, we're working with a multinational company now, and we're going to map the entire global workforce. They've got 1.3 million staff across the globe. So that you can imagine when you've got a really large organization, the amount of data insights that that you get. So the larger, the more they just become like these statistical gems of wisdom that you can start to use and go, wow, we didn't know that 6% of our workforce identify with Islam in this part of the world. They've got Ramadan coming up. Maybe we can give them floating days. Maybe we can have prayer rooms for them. So you can, the possibilities are endless, and they're going to vary from organization to organization. So we run a program called data, insights, action. So it's working with DEI managers, how they can take the data, you know, do the deep dive, and then how that can inform a whole range of action plans. Yes. Esperanza.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted again. Yeah, I also find it really interesting, and we had a very interesting conversation as well, because I was wondering, and I asked Reza, what happens when we think that we have like a very homogeneous group, but what it actually isn't. So how do you measure that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because this question comes up again and again and again. And most organizations, when they think that they're really homogenous, they're not when they take the tool, because they begin to realize they're, you know, they're looking at themselves through one lens. They're not looking at themselves from, you know, all these different aspects of identity. And then they go, well, no, we're different age, we're different positions, we're, you know, we have different worldviews. Yes, the ethnicity might be very, very similar, but that's fine, because if you're working in an environment where your environment is very similar, then that comes back to that mutuality and that representation. So the mutuality index becomes vital to you know, to an organization's you know, being. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any other comments, reflections?
One of the things that occurred to me, when I took the survey, I realized that it actually goes a lot deeper than I had stated, because I think I wrote English, and then I saw that there was British English or da-da-da English, and you could really sort of fine tune what kind of English you pick. And I think that's really relevant, especially when it comes to helping people to identify their specific markers, their specific identity markers. Then I will disclose that when it came to the religion part, or the, you know, spiritual, I just felt overwhelmed. And I said, I prefer not to disclose, because quite honestly, if I have to go into what my spirit is about, it seemed too complex. So I think it would be interesting to sort of think in terms of the population that you are administering the survey to, and to prime them or to prepare them to really consider this holistically for their good, because it is a little bit overwhelming, especially if you are a person who has, in my case, I hope, a hold on my identity. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Do I really want to go into the specifics of every single thing? And to encourage the people to actually do that, to spend the time, because that's how the organization is really going to get the benefit from this tool.
Yeah, so not only is the organization going to get the benefit, but the individuals are going to get the benefit too.
Yeah.
Because if they participate, and the more they disclose, then the more the organization can respond to what the needs might be for that for those individuals. What we've found with some organizations is that the first time they deploy the tool, there's not much of an uptake. There might be 50%. When they deploy the tool the second time around, people felt, because it starts so much of a conversation, people go, well, I wasn't there, and you guys have created some action strategies and you've left me out of it. And they go, no, I want to be included the second time around. So that's what's also beginning to unfold with the deployment of the tool. Any questions, any comments? We've got, I'm happy to continue. I know the time's up, but pass it over to the floor for any comments.
I guess I'll just give you some feedback. First of all, I mean, I love the tool. I absolutely love it. I see a ton of potential. How long has it been functional?
Okay, so we started to commercialize the end of 2019. So we went out to market, and we have about 75 people on the platform now, 75 organizations that are on the platform. And we've used it in these sort of settings well over, a couple of hundred. Can I just give you a bit of interesting insights? It's still really early days at the moment, but what we've found is that organizations that aim to have greater cultural diversity as part of their workforce end up having more gender diversity, so they end up becoming, there's a greater gender balance. And I think that's really interesting. Why, I don't know. And, someone's going to have to come along and do, a whole team of students are going to have to do some PhDs on this. But yeah, if an organization goes, you know what, let's make our focus, let's not focus on trying to have greater gender equality, but focus on greater cultural diversity. By doing that, they end up having greater gender diversity in the organization.
Interesting. So the other piece of that functional question is, I've taken it twice now in 2 days, and both times I had a delay in the loading. And part of it, like, for example, on the worldview, there's just so many options. And so I get that it takes a while to load, but I found that I didn't get as exact of an answer as I could have, because I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can scroll through 50 options, right? So I just sort of summarized a bit. And I guess the feedback then is if there's any way to invest in perhaps faster loading or processing.
That's a good question.
Results might be a bit more specific, at least in my case.
Reza, can you speak to that, Reza? Because this has happened now 2 days in a row.
A part of that is the nature of religions, because religions are religions, branches, and denominations. I mean, some people just describe themselves as Christian. Some people say that, no, I'm Orthodox. And then some people say that I'm Greek Orthodox or Ukrainian Orthodox. So the platform is in a way that inner joins all these 8,500 plus religions together. There are so many gods there. It's
so Reza, how do we speed up? The question was, how do we speed up the power?
The question is like constant, like improving the algorithm of how we can mix these religions together, and the platform has a learning thing in the backend. So it learns how people behave, how people choose their religion, and based on that, it makes itself faster and faster and faster over the time. So we have some like machine learning algorithms to make the search algorithm faster. So if you come back in about, let's say, 2 months time, you would have a much more fruitful experience, hopefully. And by the way, that's how I keep my job.
Thank you, Reza, for answering that. Any other comments? Esperanza, Amy, Alendra? Yeah.
Peter, I had a question. I've worked for almost 20 years in international school systems around the world. And I wondered if you and your team have ever worked with an international school. I'm thinking about schools that I've been in the past and directors that I've worked with who would have loved to use this tool as within the educational institution as a whole, to map the school, to see what the diversity was like in the school. I'm just curious, have you been approached by an international school? I'm just
no, we haven't, but we believe we're going to be approached by a school through you pretty soon.
No, because I'm definitely going to put it out through my network to different directors I've worked with, because I was a social studies teacher and I could see rolling out the students taking the survey in a social studies class and a history class or through advisory, and then mapping the whole school and looking at the data together with the kids in an assembly. I mean, what an amazing, it's very powerful. So that's good to know. I'm going to put it out there in my network.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I've just put my email in the chat.
Yeah, no, I'm going to put it out into one of my networks as well, because, we're working within the field of study abroad. And within the field of study abroad, there's a, sharp increase to encourage diversity and inclusion. But I don't think, based on what, the reality is that we haven't actually conducted the surveys. We don't actually know who our population students coming in is. So I'm gonna promote that as well through the one at least in Spain, or maybe on a European level.
Yeah, I'm sort of mindful that we've gone over time, but just in terms of the value proposition, it does vary from sector to sector. But start to think of mergers and acquisitions, for example. 70 to 90% of mergers and acquisitions fail. And you think of how the tool can be used for attracting talent, greater workforce engagement, staff retention, how you can improve that mutuality. So the customers start to see themselves, in the businesses that they're doing business with. It just goes on and on. For me, I think the biggest value of the tool is how it can start to be used by governments in making themselves more representative of their communities. We know there's a strong correlation between a representation and peace, especially in conflict-stricken areas. I mean, thinking places like Myanmar, for example, where there's so many languages spoken, where you have civil society organizations, the military police, where they don't even have the linguistic competency of the areas that they're working in, because there's so much diversity. So the tool could really start to be used in a whole range of different settings, and I'm hoping that it can start to be embraced by governments eventually, because that will make them more relevant. Even during the pandemic at the moment in Australia, they got us to fill out a survey, and I thought this was a huge missed opportunity where they could have started to look at the relationship between vaccine hesitancy and anti-vaxxers, and maybe certain groups in the certain groups. Is there a relationship between reactions to the vaccine and ethnicity? We know there's a huge relationship between ethnicity and health. Every doctor you speak to will tell you there's a huge relationship. Like, I suffer from the Celtic curse. 1 in every 70 people in Ireland suffer from the Celtic curse, which is hemochromatosis. So, some cultures have got certain predispositions towards illnesses. So the possibilities are endless. And then you can even start to apply to diet, for example, and certain cultures do a lot better and they live longer, and that's because of their diet. And then you go, wow, the diet's changed. What's happened here? So, there's so much application, I see.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, for participating. You will be getting an email as part of, anybody who registers for this gets an email where we'd like to get feedback on the presentation itself, and also encourage, people to deliver and offer webinars through our platform to keep spreading information and training in all of the different tools that are available and the techniques and methodologies. So thank you all for being here. And this will be edited and will go on our CHR España YouTube page. And there's a section, so for those of you that were in the breakout room, there's actually a section where Peter and I were looking at the data from the CHR España and explaining how to use the information in a little bit more detail. So even if you participate, you might want to see that YouTube video to see the part that you missed.
But Almendra, thank you very much for inviting me. And if anyone wants to reach out to us, we're happy to do presentations again and again and again. I want to thank my two colleagues, Osvaldo, who's in Portugal, and Reza, who's in Melbourne, like me. Reza, I don't think it's worth going to sleep because it's 4 o'clock. I usually get up around 4:30 anyway, 5 o'clock. So,
Thank you for being awake.
Yes.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good night, good afternoon, good day.
Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.